3 and 2, and I think we are live. Good morning, Lisa.
Good morning, Delinda.
How are you doing?
I'm doing good.
I was asking you just a little bit earlier, have you been up a while? And what did you tell me?
That I get up at 5:30 with the chickens.
And that is
Uh,
literal. If y'all haven't been around with Lisa lately, she actually has a couple chickens. How many chickens do you have now?
I'm up to 7 now.
Oh my gosh, really?
Yeah, yeah.
Love
The
that.
latest additions was a couple of white. Well, they were supposed to be buff Orpington. They got the wrong one, and then the other ones are Easter eggers. They're so pretty, and their feathers feel like some microfiber type material. It's just so soft.
Oh, yeah?
So yeah. So
Well, hey, Karen, good morning. I see you're on here with us. Yay. And I love it that you sign right in because then I know that the chat box is working.
yes.
Appreciate that. So, for those of you who may not have been with me or who are newer to the show, this is Lisa Fredrickson. She lives out here in Las Vegas, same place with me, like Gary. So, Lisa, just give them a quick, just a quick 1, 2, 3 about you.
I'm an author marketing coach. I used to do a long time ago. I used to do business consulting for larger projects in different countries, and slowed it down and started my own business, and that evolved into publishing and self-publishing and all that kind of guga. But anyway, I have a blast helping not nonfiction but fiction authors achieve their dreams. And I work in my business just kind of keeps niching down. So now I do speculative fiction and mystery thrillers.
That is so cool. Now, that I can't even imagine writing one of those. That's so not in my wheelhouse. Or at least not that I know of yet. You never know how God may direct. And all of you out there, you know by now that if I just disappear for a minute, that it's to either let the dog in or let the dog out or something, but trying to keep her from barking. So, yeah, and so that it's been really cool to watch the expansion of what you've been doing in your publishing over these last couple of years. So it's really fun to watch. So welcome back to the show.
Thank you.
Thanks. And good morning, Sherry. Nice to have you here as well. So this morning we are going to be talking about walking in faith. It's like, I think sometimes people think, well, I can't share my faith. I'm not a preacher. I'm not I can't get up in front of a group. And that is so really not the point. It is how we live our life every day that really shows our faith and shows what's important to us. So we're going to, that's our topic for this morning. And sometimes it's a way of looking at, how do you incorporate it into your normal life? Because the truth is, as a believer, and we're both Christians, and most of the audience that listens are Christians. So we're all followers of Christ. So we have that to start out with. So that's our common denominator between all of us. And as we look at walking in faith, what does that look like? How does it change possibly how we run our business and how we live our life and how we deal with our family? But also then what challenges, and Lisa and I were just briefly touching on that this morning, what challenges are happening in today's world, for instance, where it's not quite as, when I was growing up, it just seemed like everybody was a Christian. Everybody went to church on Sunday. It was the accepted norm. It was the fact of life. That's just the way it was. And
Yeah.
it's really astounding to me that just in my lifetime, how much that has turned around. So I think we just get the opportunities to look at things a little bit differently. So, and Kathy says, hi, good morning. And Mary Keller, good morning. Cool. I love it when y'all say hi. So anybody else that's out there, just say hi in the box. We love to see that. So, Lisa, I'm going to just right off the bat. So what do you think about that? So what are just kind of your general overall thoughts of, living and walking in our faith?
Whenever we're talking about Christ, I think some of the things that we feel is that even though we all believe in Christ, we have different nuances in that belief. And anything that's different kind of gets to be scary, in my opinion. And so sometimes we'll avoid those topics just because we have some differences and we don't want to rock the boat or do anything like that. Yet, to me, I mean, the reason I share is because I know that no matter how different anybody's beliefs are, we have that common thread, which is Christ.
Yeah.
So when it's Christian to Christian and I'm trying to work in my business and things like that, I like to rejoice in that what we have in common. And I'm like, and if I have differences, I just state them like opinions like you might have for flavors of ice cream or colors. I'm not there to, convince anybody of a certain pathway or anything like that. But I love sharing my path, what I believe, and I love hearing what others believe because I believe that's what enriches us. And sometimes when we're working in business, we think there's no place for those type of conversations. And yet I find that in common conversations when I'm consulting and everything else, I'll say, well, this is my belief in my foundation. This is how I work through it. And maybe you might find that useful. And that type of approach has worked really well in my consulting because I used to consult for project management and all that kind of stuff. And believe it or not, conversations about Christ and all kinds of different scriptures would come in and weave themselves into what we were doing, even if that person was agnostic or they were of a different religion completely and didn't believe in Christ. I mean, I've worked in 22 different countries, so you can only imagine the different religions that I've bumped into. And yet I could speak of Christ quite comfortably just by not pushing that on that person and just testifying of what I felt. And that's how I've done it. I don't know how everybody else does it, but that's kind of the way I found joy in what I was doing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I love that, and I think that's really true. I think sometimes the we get the feeling, or it's out there, the feeling that we have to try to convince somebody to believe just like we do, and oftentimes that when that happens, it includes sometimes there's those that judge other people, so they're judging you and putting you down sometimes, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
When really, like you were saying, if you just share your faith is what's real to you, and you can share that. But I think it's when we start trying to, well, you should, the shoulds, you should do this and you should do that. It's not. Whereas if we really go back to what Scripture says, it's really so simple. I mean, it really, and it guides both our working and our in our family lives and just the person that we are. It says, love the Lord your God with all your heart and all your soul and all your strength. Okay, so truly love God. And then when they asked Jesus what was the greatest commandment, he started with that. And then he said, and the second is like unto it, love your neighbor as yourself.
Yeah.
So if we do that, if we're just loving people, which means we're going to respect them, we're going to appreciate them, we're going to value them, then the other things kind of work out, because then if you're walking in integrity, and I think things like being a woman of your word, following through on what you say you're going to do, or if there's a reason you can't, you say it. It's like living in integrity. And sometimes we get the opportunity to say, somebody will ask, because I've been asked through the years, so how do you do this? So, why, what is this hope or this optimistic outlook that you have? And it's Christ. And so when we get the opportunity, and I looked that up this morning, First Peter says, always be prepared to give an answer for the hope that is within you. And so sometimes they're going to ask and you get that chance, but sometimes it's just a matter of your being able to, let your yes be yes and your no be no, and walk that line that way.
Sherry says, I've seen this a lot more, especially through the pandemic. People have been so unkind to each other to the pandemic. or through the pandemic, probably, people should ask, what would Jesus do? I'm assuming.
Yes, and I think, I don't remember exactly when that started, the what would Jesus do? Um, it got to be 15, could be even 20 years ago. And when it came out, people kind of really thought about that, and then it sort of slides by the wayside. And sometimes it seems now it's become a little trite, for lack of a better word, but it is so true. If we just pause and take a moment and think to yourself, so how would Jesus handle this? And he, and it doesn't mean, and I think also sometimes we feel like that means we have to accept all of the evil, the sin, the bad that's in the world, and that is not it. We can love. It's the difference really between loving the people. You can hate the you can hate the sin. Okay, you cannot like what somebody's doing, but you can still love the person. You think about your kids. My kids have made, which I'm sure my mother would say about me too. I made a lot of decisions my mother didn't like. And so she could, she could hate the behavior, but she still loved me. And that's the way we are with our kids. And that's how Christ is with us. Certainly, he certainly doesn't like all the things that we do. And we all know that we do things wrong, but his love is still there. So that's how we need to be with other people, I think. It's just really loving and respect. And I think Sherry made a good point there, that during this time, I've seen it both ways. I've seen a lot more kindness and people trying to reach out and help where they can. But then I've seen a lot of just nasty talk. There's been just a lot of nasty, mean kind of talk. And that certainly does not reflect, our faith, and when I read some of this, like, how could somebody say that? I'm astounded at how mean people can be sometimes.
Yeah. I think social media because people feel like they have a mask on that they can say whatever they want, but social media tends to bring out some of the meaner statements, I've noticed.
Yes,
like I would never hear that in a crowd, generally speaking.
Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, I think that, especially, it's not like they're seeing you every time. You can just post it and, they're putting it out there for the world, or a lot of times it's just random out there. And also put on the fact that we're now wearing masks all the time.
Yeah.
So you can wear a mask. And I've seen some people give some pretty nasty looks, even with their mask on.
Yeah.
It's like, you can tell they're disapproving of something, I'm not sure always what it is. So take that for a minute, Lisa, and let me get the dog in. And,
okay.
Continue on with that thought.
About masks?
Just in general, how we can be mean to each other.
Well, I think I'll probably go back to the business side of what we were talking about, which was, what challenges do we, get when we're in business and we're trying to emanate and walk in faith. And, one of the challenges when I was in these big business projects was that you had like some of the projects that I worked on was an Italian wind farm, and we're talking about $110 million project. And there were things where we would be going through documents and stuff like that, and the person who's wanting to get the investment might court you and say, hey, could you just kind of overlook these credits and things that are in the documents, and so that we could do this, we could probably do this type of thing on the side to help you. And those are the type of things that you have to go home and say to yourself, is that something that is legal? Is it something that I'm willing to do? Is it right? And and that one's an obvious one. Not all things that we encounter are so obvious. And so, I would go home and pray about those things, search the scriptures, kind of write down the pros and cons. And I know that sounds a little excessive, but sometimes you hit those gray areas where you're like, well, is this right or is this wrong? And so walking in faith in a business can actually take quite a bit of effort, especially depending on the business you're in.
Mhm. Absolutely. And I would think also when you said you were in 22 countries, which means you're you were experienced with being people of a totally different culture as well as language, and the different things that go on in their countries, and being respectful of that, but
Yes.
also, like you say, staying true to who you are.
Well, and like in Indonesia, you would get reactions when you would go in and you would say, okay, here's the project. And they'd say, okay, well, here's this fee. And you'd ask what that fee was, and it's a bribe. But that's a common thing. That's like you and I going to coffee, you know, and just talking. Bribes in Indonesia are, eating, drinking, and breathing. And so then do you work in a project like that? Merrick Keller says, I agree that some people feel they can say whatever they want to on social media, even if it's not kind. Yes, I agree with that.
Absolutely.
But anyway, so I mean, and if you bring it in here, I think we're going to see those, like, and I don't know if this is out there, but if you're servicing a situation where somebody has a different belief, do you, enter that service? Like, I'm not saying it's right or wrong to make a cake for somebody who has a different belief, but those are things that we have to be challenged with as Christians, is to think about what we are willing to do in this world and what we're not willing to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's true. And I think sometimes it can be very subtle, and sometimes it can be very obvious, like what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And I think too, even in our families, it, you know, what are you doing when you're in your real life, just being you at home, mom at home? Are we, I always had, it always bugged me um, to, my kids would say, well, just, when the phone would ring, this was before, we didn't have, everybody have a cell phone. Okay. So there was the phone line in the house. When somebody would call, I just would not lie to their friends. I mean, they say, well,
me neither.
I don't want to talk to them. Tell them I'm not home or something. I say, no, I'm not going to lie. I'll tell them you don't feel like speaking right now, but just little things like that, I think, make a difference. Do we, I think I've said this somewhere along the line before, do we cheat on our taxes? Do we try to, and I would say, and we do take full advantage of what the law is, but we do not cheat and we don't make things up. But it's those little things that I think when we begin to compromise in some of what seems like a nothing, the whole white lie thing, like, what is that anyway? Not a lie is a lie, right?
Yeah.
And that was something that was really important with us. And I'm sure most of you, or probably all of you out there, in raising our kids, is to teach them the value of truth. And that's at home. And that's in business, again, let your word be your word. I think that's one of the biggest traits, or one of the greatest characteristics of Christian living that we have.
Now, one of the things when I was a child, and I'm bringing this story up to go into something in business that happens that women might come into, and I'm curious about what you would do about it. So when I was young, I had a lady up the street that spread rumors about me as a teenager, and to the point where she literally did hurt my reputation, both in the church that I was in and in the neighborhood that I was in. They were all lies. It was something that hit me very hard, and I never talk about people ill that way, or I try not to put it that way. But in business, I have seen people, because we talk and we do and things like that, I've seen people talk about others to the point where people believe that and they group off and move away from that person in business. How do you feel that as Christians we should deal with those challenges when we're met with gossip and we're met with negative comments about people. And, you know, I've always learned around you that negativity like that is not in words is not good. How would you deal with that?
Okay, so are you, if I'm understanding you correctly, so when somebody is talking that way and you're there, is that what it is? When others are,
Yeah, you know, when let's say you're in a network of women and we may not know each other very much or et cetera, but if somebody starts talking negatively about another person, in other words, gossip comes into all kinds of areas and gossip can be very damaging.
Okay.
How
Yes.
do you deal with that in a business setting?
I think I always try to redirect it.
That's a good answer.
I don't like to straight out condemn, say, just I've had a few occasions where I have had to say, y'all, y'all just excuse me. I don't like this kind of talk or something very subtle. I don't like to make it a big thing. I don't really like to have confrontation. However, I really don't like negative talk, but especially talking about others. And that's been something that I've tried to keep to work on through my life since about college, when I realized, the difference that it can make. But sometimes just, so if somebody is, if they're talking about somebody, chances are, the person, maybe the person. Okay. And if you do, then I just turn it around and say, well, yeah, but boy, she is great at this. It's like, did you know how well she does this? Or I've worked with her on a project or something. She was on a committee with me. If you can just change the tone just by something you say, bringing out something positive about that person, or if you have to just walk away from the conversation, you can do that. And people will notice, oh, wonder why she didn't get in on this. They may not ask you directly. And then again, there are those times where you do, you're in a situation where you do have to say something. That's kind of where I go with it.
And, as I was thinking, another challenge in terms of walking our faith was, what do you do when, during payment situations, when somebody hasn't quite fulfilled their contract and things are going south and stuff like that? And, how do you act and walk during those type of things in business? Do you know what I'm talking about? When you've
when they're behind, like on their payment, they were supposed to pay you and they haven't paid you.
Yeah, they haven't paid you, or you've contracted a website and that person's not getting it done, or they're dragging their feet, or they didn't do it right. And so those are times when I think can be difficult to, kind of like when you're in traffic and somebody's slowing you down and you need to get somewhere and that explicative comes out, honking your horn.
I think that's one that does get a
Not
lot
that
of
that ever happens to anybody.
Yeah, I think that does happen to a lot of people a lot of the time. Just kind of depends the whole traffic one. That's when it's like, okay, take a deep breath and like, okay, Lord, maybe. I'm glad I'm being held here in the traffic because maybe you're keeping me from an accident that's up the road.
Exactly.
Oh gosh. And I think, and that's really a valid question about the whole, if people owe you money or they don't live up to it, because, and certainly I would say most of us have had that happen before. And it can be a difficult thing. I find that if I, in kindness, if I do it head on and just talk to the person about it. I used to, and I'll say really before my years in Mary Kay, I learned so much in Mary Kay about dealing with people and understanding where people are coming from and all that kind of thing, and personalities. But to just pretend that it's not there or to hope that it's all going to work out doesn't always work. We can do that, but at some point when you're in business, you do say, by the way, I haven't received your payment yet. When do you plan to pay? Give them an opportunity, because maybe they have had something come up and say, my check didn't arrive or whatever, I lost my job. And I will always try to work it out with them as long as they say true to what their word is. If they say, well, I can't pay you now because of this or that or whatever, say, great. So when do you see that you'd be able to do this? And then as long as they meet those next things coming, I can be generous and I can be open-minded about those things. But when they then continue to renege on what they promised, there have been one or two times in my various business things where, I've had to go to that next step that I don't really like, to where, I've had to send a few letters from, have my attorney do a letter. But I try not to do that until I've exhausted the other ways.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, definitely. Well, and then and this is a personal choice, but after all of that, remaining Christian, and like when somebody in the scriptures, it says when somebody takes your coat, give them your boots, basically.
Mhm.
I know that's not exact, but that's kind of the concept, is that, and that's a personal walk and choice. But after all of those things, even in business, this is what I find, and it is that money is a great partitioner between our Christianity and our actions. And I find that money becomes quite the wedge sometimes in our decision-making processes about Christ. And in other words, it fogs our vision. I see a lot of people make choices in the business world that I would not see them normally make if there was a large amount of money in the middle of it.
Mhm.
And that was always, well, I mean, I worked with a lot of people who had a lot of money, and that made an impression on me to not think about money that way, to try to never let it get between me and who being a Christian really was. And because it can quickly taint even the most dedicated soul sometimes.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that's true. I think sometimes, again, in many problems or conflicts we can have can be resolved if we keep the door open. Now,
Good morning,
I
Grace.
agree with you when it comes to money. Money just clouds everything. I mean, it can,
Mm-hmm.
and but when so for instance, let's say you brought up the thing, if someone has a service that you've already paid them. Okay, let's go from the opposite side, that you
Mm-hmm.
paid them, and oftentimes we will have to put deposits down or pay half up front, and then they're going to do a service, and then for whatever the reason they didn't meet the deadline,
Mm-hmm.
or they're really lagging behind, and you yourself have your own deadline that you need to make, and those make it more challenging, certainly.
Yeah.
And again, I try to be I try to be careful on my tone of voice, because sometimes it comes down to they're not communicating. So now they feel bad because they know they haven't met their deadline, and now they don't want to respond to your text messages, and they don't want to respond. So sometimes we're leaving. Then that's when I try to get more personal, not just a text message or not just an email. So
Yeah.
leaving a voice message of, I understand that things happen. If you'll just contact me, we can talk about it. Letting
Yeah.
them know that you're not, it's not, why in the world haven't you done this? Trying to come from a nicer place. And it's a matter of working it out. But I think just letting them know, or working such that they know that the door is still open, you're going to try to work with them, and like, I really have this deadline, how can we make this happen, what do you need from me to finish up this project?
So what I hear you're saying is that, every step of what you're going through in your business is that we weave in that mercy and the kindness and the understanding, and that is probably the best way to approach these type of challenges. Is that what you would
Yeah,
say?
that is what that is what I try to do, and I will say in most cases that it does work. It may take longer than what you wanted. You may not have the project done on the time, but ultimately, I found for me, it does happen. then it's my choice whether I want to give that a project to that same person again. That's where then I'll make the decision. I'd fool me once, shame on me, but fool me twice, whatever. That shame on you, then the second time, shame on me.
I know what you're talking about.
Those of you guys, y'all know what I'm saying. Yeah.
The fool me and twice thing, we all, yeah.
So, yeah. And I used to, I guess in my early years, I tried to avoid confrontation at all costs. I wouldn't respond. I just pretend like it was going to go away. It never did in most cases. And when I learned to just talk about things up front before they get so bad, and I think that is, I guess part of our Christian walk in that, like say, grace and mercy and trying to leave the door open. So.
Yeah. By the way, we hit 8 o'clock.
Oh, we did. Oh my gosh. Thank you for noticing, because I didn't notice. So yeah, so I'm gonna just leave y'all with a couple things that, and I know, because I know those of you who are on here, I know you, and I'm so thrilled that you're here, and I love how you're, these are important topics to you, and we all want to do better, but the couple of just scriptures that we talked about, Matthew 22:39, if somebody wants to type that in the box, or I can put it in later. Luke 10:27 and Mark 12:33. Those are all the ones those three, because those are the gospels, the parallel gospels that are telling Jesus' story. And most of the time they do the same ones, but all, these three talked about what Jesus said when he said, what's the greatest commandment? And as Christians, I think it's always important to go back to that. And so those are all about, love the Lord your God with all your heart and all your soul and all your strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. So when we're thinking about anything, if we put it up against that, and I had wondered, in the Bible, it doesn't say the golden rule. Here's the golden rule. But no. Matthew 7:12 says, all things that you want men to do to you, you must also do to them. So there's the golden rule. They just didn't call it golden rule. So just so you know, in case you ever wondered where that is. So that Matthew 7:12. So anyway, thank you so much. Thank you, Lisa.
Oh, you're welcome. It was fun to be here.
And thank you guys for joining us. And just remember that life is not a matter of chance. It's a matter of choice. Choose wisely. Go out and walk your faith, and just let others wonder what is so wonderful about it. What is it that gives her the hope and the joy? And they're going to ask you, and you'll get the chance to talk about it. And that's pretty fun to get to share that. So, all righty. Have a great week, and we will see you next week. Bye now.
Bye.